Hello there. I've had the idea of making this video about Habbo and my experience with the game for some time now. I am no expert in video creation, as you can tell by this audio, but I'm going to do my best with what I have. This video is about Habbo Hotel, a place that I look back on fondly. Mostly. And a place that nowadays just isn't the same anymore. It's long since lost its identity, and the venture into NFTs and Web3 just signals how crippled it's become. It wasn't always like this. In fact, logging into Habbo Hotel was the highlight of my day for a long time. As somebody who didn't really have a social circle, I looked elsewhere to find somewhere I belonged. And with Habbo, I found it. I'm going to chronicle some things in this video. The rise of Habbo Hotel, and the reasons why it's a shell of its former self, and maybe some personal anecdotes along the way. So how did this rise and fall happen? Well, it's a little more than just removing a feature or two. There was always an underlying issue that Habbo Hotel never solved. The idea for Habbo came from a previous project known as Mobile's Disco. There isn't too much to say about this other than Habbo paid tribute to Mobile's Disco by creating a public room based on the original rooms in that game. They were barely populated, at least in Habbo UK, but they look cool. Speaking of Habbo UK, see, if you played Habbo after 2010, you might not know that Habbo had its own hotel for different territories. There was Habbo UK, US, Habbo China was a thing for a while until it was shut down, Australia and Finland got a hotel, and many other territories. This was quite unique, as each hotel would have different personalities you'd run into every so often, and it felt like you were part of a tight-knit community. I'll come back to that topic later. For now, what was Habbo like in the early days? Remember when I briefly mentioned public rooms earlier? Habbo had quite a lot of them all the time, and they were great places to hang out and meet new people. Some notable public rooms were the Welcome Lounge, the Ice Cafe, the Rooftop Cafe, and many more. You'd notice people taking up the same spots in these places, almost like they were trying to blend in with the furniture. Or it was most likely a way to be noticed. There was even a public room called the Cunning Fox Game Hall, where you could play mini-games with other people, like battleships and noughts and crosses. All in all, they were great places to have a great time. You weren't bound to just public rooms, and this is where Habbo's charm really showed. You could create your own private room and deck it out with the furniture of your choice, on the assumption that you bought Habbo credits, which were the in-game currency that allowed you to buy furniture and a Habbo Club membership. You could even buy actual in-game credits that you could use to trade with other people for their furniture. Trading back in the day was quite faith-based. It was easier to scam other players by putting an item in the trade box that looked similar to the item you wanted to trade for. An example of this is putting a red doormat instead of a red pillow. They'd remedy this in the future by adding a countdown and confirmation so you could check what was being traded for, but back then, scamming was quite rampant. Something I want to speak on are the Habbo raids that would happen. I'm sure you might have seen a video or two that document these raids, but what you might not know is that most of the time, a large chunk of the people participating in the raids were just normal Habbo users. I had a couple of alt accounts I'd used to join in so my main didn't get banned. A few people would enter the Lido, start blocking the pool entrance. Eventually the Habbos around them would change their looks and join in. It was honestly a lot of fun to see the reactions to a virtual pool being blocked, and getting banned for it was seen as a prize. It wasn't just a pool that they blocked. Even without outside influence, a small group of people would disrupt other players by just standing in the welcome lounge of the theatre and blocking the entrance. They wouldn't even dress identical. It was just dumb fun. They'd eventually make Habbos face for each other so blocking moves was no longer possible. Killjoys. As shown in this video, you were represented by an avatar, and the customization options were quite generous and diverse. But if you wanted more clothing and colour options, you needed to get a Habbo Club membership. Habbo Club was a monthly membership that would give you more clothing choices and more desirable colours. Each month you were a member, you'd get a new gift, ranging from a widely popular club sofa to an electric butler. Habbo actually offered official minigames like Battle Ball, which was my personal favourite. Then there was Snowstorm and Wobble Squabble. The premise of Battle Ball was to use your space hopper to lock more tiles in the enemy team. Snowstorm was a giant snowballing fight, and Wobble Squabble was a game set in the public room called the Rooftop Rumble, which would put two people against each other in a balancing act minigame. Think gladiators but pixelated and a lot of button mashing. With private rooms, people would make some really cool things, such as lounges, agencies, adoption centres, and just minigames of their own. One of the most popular user-made games at the time was Falling Fernie. The owner of the room would place chairs down randomly, and the remaining Habbo not sat in a chair would be eliminated. There was also Cosy Change, which was a Starlight competition in which the owner would pick a theme and you had to dress your Habbo to that theme. These are really fun, but in my opinion, nothing ever came close to the unsupervised and impressionable thrill of gambling. Yeah, casinos were quite popular. You could purchase dices for your room, and in what feels like an oversight on the developer's part, people quickly started using the dice to play blackjack at a young age. It was fantastic. You're probably thinking, was there any moderation to speak of? Yeah, there used to be at least. Back in the day, there were a mix of official and community moderators who went by the title of Hobbers. They honestly weren't that great, and like in any field, when you give someone power for the sake of it, they'll often abuse it, as was the case sometimes. Hobbers were discontinued and replaced later with a program called Habbo X, or Experts. They were a more tame and streamlined version of Hobbers. They participate in community events and spread awareness of how to be safe online. They'd refine the helper program 2 more times with Habbo Guides, who would send you to a new player's room and task you with giving them help with how to play, and ambassadors, which weren't really that good. On a side note, if you said an offensive word, it'd be censored with the phrase bobber. You actually couldn't turn off the chat filter until years later. And if I recall, they brought back the bobber filter after taking it away, and they took away the ability to disable the filter again. As I said, Habbo did have official moderation for a time. It was a business that focused on the teenage audience for a time, so it wasn't like you were always at the mercy of a select few users. Speaking of staff, many employees of Habbo would have their own account and would interact with the community. The most prominent of official staff were community managers. There were staff members such as Lost Witness on Habbo UK, Smooth Criminal on Habbo US, and Norman on Habbo France. I once beat Lost Witness in a game of Battle Ball, and he gave me some rare furniture for doing so. It was quite the experience to meet an official staff member. Once they entered a room, it had fast become crowded with many people, wanting to ask their questions and just wanted to say hello. This kind of casual interaction would be lost in the later years of Habbo, but for at the time it was cool to see actual members of staff interact with the community. Now, let's briefly talk about badges. See, badges were vanity items you'd get from various activities. Back in the early days, the only badges available were for moderation and for subscribing to Habbo Club. Eventually, over time, they'd widely expand the badge system, giving them out for promotional and advertising events such as movie tie-ins, and there were competition-related badges. They'd even introduce achievement badges, which you could work towards in various areas. Badges would become an integral part of your identity, but badge fatigue would set in for many as badges were given out just for logging in and existing half the time. I was once accidentally given a badge for a competition going on at the time, and I told a member of staff about it that I had on my friends list, and I suppose as a thank you for not staying quiet about it, they gave me a badge for an older competition. I always thought that was really cool of them. There are so many things I can discuss that made Habbo an amazing experience, from having a purse that physically showed your credits, to the Habbo console which housed your friends and other convenient features, to real-life celebrity visits to Habbo. I think I'll touch on my personal favourite feature, the tracks machine. You could make your own music with tracks machine, and it was amazing. I made so many CDs back in the day that I got a small bit of fame for a time when I started collecting my old CDs that I traded away long ago. I actually tried to get back as many as I could, and I kind of gave up after people would charge me more because my name was on the CD. It's pretty funny looking back. There are quite a few tracks made music floating around on the internet, but the songs that were never recorded and posted outside of Habbo have been lost due to Habbo and updates eventually disabling the ability to play music in tracks machines and getting rid of the classic Habbo homepages where you could feature your songs. It's a real shame because there were so many great songs made by the community, but this becomes a pattern that we'll get to. Now, I could go on forever about what made Habbo special, but I'm sure you're getting really bored of listening to my voice. So let's get into how the fall happened, and it happened in a short space of time. As I said earlier, it's not as simple as removing certain features. There was an integral problem with Habbo that would never be solved, and that was the player base themselves. See, when a negative change came to Habbo, people would just quit, but a small portion of those who left would return months or years later. Despite what their adverts and events would tell you, Habbo always struggled to keep new members after around 2007 onwards. A portion of the older player base would always return to check in and play again for a time. For a virtual world targeted at teenagers, this becomes a problem, as the player base wasn't getting younger, it was getting older, and this would come back to haunt Habbo in the future. Despite existing since the year 2000, Habbo's downfall doesn't actually truly begin until around 2008, when Habbo announced they were transitioning from a Shockwave-based client to Flash. Damn, I feel old. They'd have a beta for the new client, and you could try out the new client and use the old one, but eventually the new Flash client would become the main, and the Shockwave client would be inaccessible after 2009. The problem with this is that the Flash client broke a lot of things. Some features didn't even exist anymore. Remember earlier when I was talking about how fun public rooms were? Well, the transition to Flash broke most of them. Some were even removed. The tracks machine's functions were broken, and you can no longer make music. The old minigames like Battle Ball couldn't be played anymore, which upset a lot of people, myself included. The new client came with better graphics and a new UI, but that just wasn't enough compared to what was lost. And this marks the first point in which people start to leave in droves and not return. In 2010, Habbo would announce that all English-speaking hotels were going to merge. This included the United Kingdom, Canadian, American, Singaporean, and Australian hotels. The assumption is that this was done to boost the player-based population in one place, but all this did was fracture the population further. See, Habbo UK was by far the most popular English-speaking hotel, with around 20 to 30,000 people logging in at peak hours. But after the merge, the entirety of the English Habbo community could barely hit 6,000. And to make things worse, the merge broke a lot of things, including groups and Habbo personal homepages. Most of the Habbo forum posts were lost at this time too. Also in 2010, they tried to bring back two classic minigames, Snowstorm and Battle Ball. They added furniture lines to guest rooms which would allow you to make your own arenas, but it just wasn't the same. And after release of both furniture lines, most people were just using them to make AFK farms, so you didn't have to actively participate in playing the games to get the achievement badges associated with them. The magic of the classic minigames just wasn't there anymore. Later in 2010, they would add VIP membership, which was a higher tier subscription from Habbo Club that offered even more clothing and colour options. They later removed the ability to buy Habbo Club and made VIP the only subscription, which was protested by pretty much every legacy user, as VIP just wasn't that interesting of a replacement. Like most things, they'd actually bring back the original Habbo Club and discontinue VIP. A pointless change which unfortunately happens quite a lot in this story. In 2011, they would start to delete accounts that didn't merge. This gave rise to people snatching as many unique usernames as they could, and this boosted the black market to new heights. This isn't a side of Habbo that most would talk about. People would make a lot of money by selling unique usernames, credits, and old accounts. It was honestly difficult to determine if somebody was who they claimed to be with how rampant this market was, and I assume probably still is. In 2012, the biggest blow was dealt to Habbo's reputation when a British TV channel, known as Channel 4, did an investigative report on Habbo and found that paedophiles were using Habbo to solicit explicit material from Habbo's younger audience. This wasn't an isolated incident, it was a pandemic on Habbo Hotel, and even worse, by 2012, barely any human moderation existed, replaced by an awfully insufficient auto-moderation system. And in response to the report, and in what can only be described as a desperate move, the parent company of Habbo, Sulake, globally muted Habbo so no conversation could take place on the website. It could be argued that this one event killed Habbo, as not only was the reputation in pieces, but user trust was at rock bottom. I remember being on Habbo at the time of this report airing, and loads of guest rooms were being made with names such as Habbo is dead, with people celebrating the downfall, setting off digital fireworks to mark the occasion. I was talking to somebody about the report, and in mid-discussion, we and the entire hotel was muted, barred from further discussion. At the start of the so-called Great Mute, there was actually a few exploits in which you could still chat with each other. You could use already placed sticky notes to talk, private messaging worked on and off for a while, and whispering to others still worked for a short time before being disabled. It cannot be overstated just how much of a death blow this did to Habbo's community. With no way to communicate and with the website's reputation shattered, people started leaving in droves, and it would never recover from this. Channel 4 would do a few more segments on Habbo, even bringing in people who played Habbo to discuss the issue, and pretty much every retailer selling them would pull the Habbo credit gift cards from their stores. A couple months would go by and the website would re-enable chat but with more automated features to assist in catching bad actors, but it really didn't do much to solve the problem. It was still an issue. Channel 4 would never really follow up on the story. Being on Habbo during this time was strange. You'd visit this world for its community, and when you can't even say hello to someone, you start to lose interest fast. It didn't help that, as discussed earlier, features that could have kept people playing even through the Great Mute were either gone or gutted. There just wasn't much reason to play anymore. There isn't really that much of value to discuss past 2012. The next couple of years went by with Habbo rapidly releasing store bundles and items in what can only be assumed as an attempt to get as much revenue as possible from the remaining community. It worked for a while, as some store bundles contained a lot of nostalgia bait, knowing that a lot of the community that still hung on were veteran players from long ago, but even they got bored of the recoloured sets eventually. Habbo was nothing more than a memory for most people at this point. You'd get the occasional YouTuber visiting the website, but beyond the exposure from YouTubers, Habbo still struggled to keep an audience. More importantly, gain new members. As at this point, most of the people playing were above the teenage age Habbo was originally intended for. Years later, Habbo would once again transition to a new client. Support for the Flash plugin was on its way out, and keeping a reliance on something that was already a safety risk before its end of support was not really an option. The change was another disaster. Core features were being disabled or removed, and the UI underwent another negatively received overhaul. Again, more people jumped ship here. In 2021, Habbo announced their venture into the NFT world, and I think I can stop the story here. This truly was the end of Habbo. Its transition to the Web3 space wasn't a welcome sight for a lot of its remaining community. This isn't a hit piece on the NFT community, but Habbo's venture into the space wasn't done with goodwill. It simply existed as an intent to capture a new market, not a new community. I'm aware Habbo exists as a business, but its intent wasn't so nefarious in the earlier days. This marks the end of Habbo, and the beginning of something that uses the Habbo name. I haven't logged in, nor been a part of the Habbo community for years at this point, so I had to do some research on the latter part of this video. Apparently there is a classic and modern client now, but Habbo intends to, as they did in 2009, discontinue the legacy client without too much regard. Habbo also has a mobile app, but I never really cared much for it. It was a slow rise, but a fast fall. Habbo's end was a combination of poor growth, lacking moderation, and very questionable decision making. If we played a game of hindsight here for a moment, Habbo should have transitioned to a more stable platform sooner. There was an April Fool's event in Habbo once that teased the idea of Habbo coming to consoles, but if we're being serious here, probably should have made that leap. Games like Roblox and Rec Room have proven that social communities can exist outside of a website, and Habbo really never did much to branch out. Even a Steam release would have given Habbo some lasting relevance. I made this video because I'll always cherish the memories I made on Habbo, the people I had the honour to blend it up with, and the rooms I created and visited. It might sound sad from an outsider's perspective, but I really do mean it when I say this silly virtual world had a big impact on my life. Do I see much of a future for Habbo? I don't know. The Habbo I knew is dead, so I can't really say much on the future for what exists now, and the shame of all this is there really isn't anything out there like Habbo was back in the day. I'd say Club Penguin, but that shut down years ago, but there are still community projects keeping it alive. Habbo had its own community servers pop up now and again through its history. They were known as Habbo Retros and functioned like the classic Habbo clients did, but these have since faded into the background too. Habbo just doesn't have that much staying power anymore. If you've reached this far into the video, I appreciate you putting up with my amateur voice and audio. I made this video as a passion project. I think I did an okay job. Did you play Habbo? Do you have any fond memories of Habbo? Thank you for watching.